All right. All right. This is George Cook at African American Reports, and I'm here with Lawrence Hamm, the chairman of the People's Organization for Progress. On August 5th, we had the anniversary of the 1965 Voting Rights Act bill. And then yesterday, there was a protest in front of the federal building in Newark led by Mr. Hamm and his organization, People's for Progress. So I wanted to bring him on to discuss why he was there and why the Voting Rights Act is important. How you doing, Mr. Hamm?
Good morning, George. Thank you for having me on. And yes, we just passed a very important milestone anniversary in the history of the Black freedom struggle here in the United States, in the history of the Civil Rights Movement. August 6th was the 60th anniversary of the signing into law of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson on August the 6th, 1965. And it is one of the major achievements, most remembered achievements of the civil rights movement. The other major, most remembered achievement would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that became law the previous year. As many people can remember, millions and millions of Black people were either outright denied the right to vote or kept from voting through various suppression um, techniques and efforts. Uh, Probably mostly in the South, but not exclusively in the South. For those who can, they might go online, take a look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965, because it actually names states and counties and cities that were that had been denying Black people the right to vote. So the Voting Rights Act was very specific. And with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, millions of people who didn't have the opportunity to vote could now vote. And Black people voted with a passion. In 1966, there were about between 400 and 500 Black elected officials in the United States. By the 1970s, there were over 10,000. So once Black people got that right to vote, they exercised it uh, uh, with unparalleled energy, and this affected folks all over the country. But I think it's important for me to say that the Voting Rights Act was paid for with blood. Uh, just 2 days before the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act was August 4th. And that was the day that the bodies of the three civil rights workers, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, who had been murdered by the Klan and buried in an earthen dam, their bodies were discovered. They were civil rights workers that were in the Deep South, registering our people to vote. Before that, we remember the Bloody Sunday marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. 3 times, Dr. Martin Luther King and thousands of people in the civil rights movement marched from Selma, attempted to march from Selma to Montgomery. And when they got to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were stopped by the Alabama state troopers, and they were beaten mercilessly. In the aftermath of the first march, Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed. In the aftermath of the second attempt to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a Unitarian minister, James Reeb, was beaten to death. So these are just a few of the scores. People don't know. You know, they think of the civil rights movement, they think of Dr. King, I Have a Dream. They don't know, prior to the March on Washington, prior to the passage of the the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, scores of civil rights workers were killed in the South just for helping our people exercise their constitutional and democratic right to cast their ballot for the candidate of choice. But here we are today in the 21st century, 60 years after the signing into law of the Voting Rights Act, and we find ourselves in a very peculiar place because now we are fighting the same things that Dr. King and the other civil rights freedom fighters were fighting in the 1960s. We're fighting against voter suppression. We're fighting against gerrymandering. We're fighting against efforts to really drag us back to the 1930s and 40s. And we see this in executive orders that were signed, that have been signed by Donald Trump, which in fact are designed to suppress the black vote. We see this in the gerrymandering. I mean, look at what's going on down there in Texas. That's
Yes.
national news. National news. The legislators, the Democratic legislators in Texas had to flee Texas in order to keep the legislature from having a quorum, that is, enough members present to actually vote on a law or vote on a bill. They left because one of the bills that the governor called the legislature into session for was a gerrymandering bill, a bill to redraw the congressional district lines in Texas that would essentially deny Black and Latino voters an ability to elect Black and Latino representatives to the Texas legislature. It was almost a repeat of 2020. Do you remember when Donald Trump told the Secretary of State of Georgia, find me
Yeah.
10,000
Thousand
votes?
votes.
Find me 10 because Trump was knew he would lose the election. So they told him that was illegal. So in the same way that Trump told the Secretary of State of Georgia to find him 10,000 votes, Trump called up Governor Abbott, another right wing uh, um, uh, extremist who is the governor of Texas. He told Abbott, find me 5 congressional seats because Trump knows that the midterm elections are coming up. And what happens during the midterm elections? In the midterm election, the party that's in power, the party that has their person in the White House and has control of the House and control of the Senate and or control of the Senate, that party usually loses seats in the midterm election because the president who was elected previously generally had not kept his promises. People become disenchanted, so they vote for the opposite party or another party in the midterm elections. So Trump, now they already have a razor thin. I only think the
Yeah.
Republicans have a majority in the House by 3 or 4 votes.
Yeah, it's not that
So
much.
that not even that much. So now they want 5 more seats, and they know Texas is the place that they could get it because Abbott will do anything Trump wants him to do. So we're in this peculiar. So what's the remedy? The remedy is that we need to get past laws to protect our voting rights, to stop voter suppression, and to stop gerrymandering. At the federal level, we need to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act passed. In the state legislature in New Jersey, we need to get another bill named after John Lewis, but in the state legislature, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New Jersey passed. We need to get those 2 bills passed to protect our voting rights in the nation and in the country. And the other thing that People's Organization for Progress would like to see, we'd like to see the same day voter registration bill passed. Because right now, if you are not a registered voter and you go into the polls on election day, you can't vote, period. Why is that? In other countries, there's no such thing as a cutoff date for voter registration. If you're not registered, you can go to the poll, you can register to vote at the poll, and you can vote at the poll. We need to have that because we think more people would vote in elections. if they knew that, oh, because most people don't think about elections, right? Until it's time to go vote.
That's cool.
Then they're like, oh, I'm not registered, so I'm not going. No, we want same day voter registration. So those are some of the things we think need to be done.
Mr. Hamm, I want to appreciate what you said, but can you please let people know that voting rights are seriously under attack? As the Voting Rights Act is one of those few things that has to be reauthorized. I don't believe it's been reauthorized in a long time, and people think, oh no, it's there. They take it for granted. Please reinforce the fact that with this Supreme Court, with this current president, they are legitimately under attack.
Well, let me say this. You are absolutely right, George. Our voting rights are under serious attack, but they have been under attack literally for 60 years. I know it's hard to fathom, but Dr. King said in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? He said the country had already turned its back on civil rights and on the war on poverty. And he said that in 1966. That was 2 years before he was assassinated. He said he could see it coming. The Civil Rights Act had only been signed 2 years previously, and the Voting Rights Act signed the previous year. And by 1966, Dr. King was saying the country had already turned its back. If we wanted a benchmark, we could use the election of Richard Nixon in 1972. Because see what happens, history is not like a TV show. It's not like episodes, with a beginning and an end and a happy ending. History is ongoing. It never stops. So the people who opposed the Civil Rights Act in 64 and who opposed the Voting Rights Act in 65, they didn't stop. They kept going to court. They've been going to court for 60 years to try to stop, to try to turn back, to try to repeal the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. But imagine it's like driving a car, right? You're driving, you're driving nonstop from Newark to Trenton. So generally you're going about what, 60 miles an
60,
hour, right?
65, yeah.
Yeah, 65 miles an hour. But now you get to a certain point and you step on the accelerator and now you're going, maybe 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour. That's what Trump is like. See, they've been attacking our voting rights for 60 years, but the attack has become accelerated, intensified, in your face with the Trump administration. They don't care. They don't care. They're like, yeah, we want affirmative action eliminated. We want DEI eliminated so we can put in unqualified white people. Look at Trump's cabinet. None of them are qualified.
Not a one of them.
Not a one of them are qualified, to be in these seats. And then, Trump's like, I don't care. I'm going to write an executive order, to put your elections under my control. And essentially, that's what his executive order said. He signed an executive order the other day saying that they want all the states to submit their voting rolls to the federal government. What do you think that's about? That's about purging. And that's how Trump won the election last year in 24, because the southern states, the red states, the ex-Confederate states, and the states that are like them, they purged their voting rolls. And I urge your viewers to look up a guy named Greg Palast, Greg Palast, Greg Palast, and go to Greg Palast's website, and you can read all the articles and see the videos that he's done to prove that Trump only won the election in 2024 through voter suppression. Imagine that. They find one person that's a felon who may have the name Larry Hamm, right? And so they go to the voting rolls and they purge everybody that has the name Larry Hamm. And I'm telling you, there are other people in America who are named Larry Hamm. So they purged all of the black people named William Johnson. You know how many William Johnsons
Yes.
there are? Or John Smiths. They purged millions. I think Palace said maybe as many as 4 million black people were purged from the voting rolls before Election Day in 2024. Kamala Harris only lost the election by 1.5%. And that's even much less than the number of people who were purged from the rolls. So, yes, our voting rights under attack. Folks, these people want to bring back slavery. Don't take my word for it. Just read. You can go and read articles in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Now, the articles are not going to say we want to bring back slavery. But if Trump is outlawing unions and decertifying unions that represent workers for the federal government, if workers don't have unions, they have very few rights. And they can work you like they want to work you. They don't want no unions. They want to pay us all minimum wage. If they could get away with it, everybody would be making $7.25 an hour, which is the current federal minimum wage. So yes, our voting rights are under attack. Our civil rights are under attack. All people have to do is this: go to Google and Google, how has the Trump administration hurt black people? Just put that in Google, because I did it. And AI itself will bring up all the bills and all the executive orders that Trump has put in place in just 200 days, and will show you how all of these things hurt the black community in a myriad, as they say, a myriad of ways. So the important thing is this: people don't tune out. Register to vote. Vote in every election. Look, if there's nobody on the ballot that you like, go to the poll and write your own name in, because you can actually do that. There's
Yes.
a little spot on the ballot.
Yes.
If you don't like anybody on the ballot, you can write anybody's name in there you want. We have to exercise our right to vote, because if we don't, look what happens. We get Donald Trump, and the president does what? He appoints the members of the Supreme Court, and you
Yep.
get a right-wing Supreme Court, and they roll back all the civil rights legislation and social justice legislation, not just of 60 years, at 100 years. We've been literally fighting 100 years war, but it's a cold war. It's a political war. It's not a war with weapons, because these people, these millionaires and billionaires, were outraged by the New Deal. And ever since the New Deal of the 1930s, they have been trying to turn back. I mean, imagine that. There was a time when we didn't have a minimum wage. There was a time when we didn't have unemployment insurance. There was a time when we didn't have Social Security. All those things were part of the New Deal. And there were people that opposed it. Just like Musk spent billions of dollars to get Trump elected, there were millionaires in the 30s spending millions of dollars to get people elected who would oppose Social Security, who would oppose unemployment insurance, who would oppose a minimum wage, who would oppose the right to collective bargaining. All of these things, who would oppose the 8-hour workday. I mean, imagine that.
Mhm.
There was a time we didn't have 8-hour workday. You was a slave. You worked from Kansas in the morning till Kansas at night. Your children worked in factories at the beginning of the 20th century. And when I say children, I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about children 8, 9, 10 years old, losing hands, losing fingers, losing limbs in the textile mills and in coal mines. All of this was changed by movements for social change, and by people who use their votes, who use their voices, who march with their feet, who use their hands to write letters and so on, that did 101 things to try to fight for justice. And that's what we have to do now. I understand a lot of people are discouraged, and a lot of people want to give up, but don't give up, brothers and sisters. What we going through can't be any worse than what our ancestors went through during slavery. I mean, imagine that. Imagine being born into slavery in the 1700s. And imagine how radical a person must have sounded who said, we got to abolish slavery, when you could get killed for saying that,
Yeah.
when it was against the law. Literally, there was a law that said if you had a copy of David Walker's appeal, I don't know how many of your viewers know David Walker's appeal. David Walker was a black abolitionist uh, in the um, in the 19th century, in the early 19th century. He wrote a book called David Walker's Appeal. It was a pamphlet calling for armed uprising against slavery in the United States of America. And if you were caught with that book, you could be put in jail and probably be killed. You'd be lucky if you got to the jail.
Yeah.
But black sailors who worked on like oh, I forgot what they called it wasn't the Coast Guard, but it was,
Yeah,
people who
the
worked on
precursor.
boats.
Yeah, the
Right,
precursor. Yeah.
right. They would take David Walker's appeal and they would uh un, unattach the lining of their coats, and they would put David Walker's appeal in the lining of their coats, sew their coats up, and smuggle it in. This is a true story. Just look up David Walker's appeal, and you'll see it. So, our struggle can't be no more difficult than our folks who the struggle they had fighting slavery, fighting Jim Crow segregation. There are more of us than there are of them. If we could just get organized and have the spirit and the will to fight back, we can win. We ain't gonna win overnight. It ain't gonna be no easy victory. There's gonna be struggle and casualties along the way. But just like the civil rights movement, just like the struggle against slavery, you know, uh, we can change this situation too.
All we need to do is wake up and do it. And I appreciate the knowledge from people like you that let us know what has been done before can't be done again.
That's right.
And I really appreciate you coming on. And for people who think you were joking about slavery, all these prisons going up, all these camps they're building, they're gonna
Yes,
use them. Because we ain't gonna work on those farms, but all those prisoners they get, guess where they're gonna be? You're gonna work on those farms for $1 an hour if you get the
that's
dollar.
right.
So
That's right.
so this thing about slavery, that's not a joke. That's something that can happen. They may call it by another name, but we all know what
That's
it
right.
is.
That's right. That's right. Thank
And
you. Thank you,
thank you for
brother.
coming on and spreading your knowledge and sharing it with us. Goodbye and God
Um,
bless.
Thank you. Have a good day, brother.
You too.
Take care.